Welcome to Assemblyman Mike Lawler. He represents New York Assembly District 97 in Rockland County, and he's running for Congressional District 17 against sitting Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, who currently represents District 18 before the state redrew its district maps. Maloney is currently the chair of the Democratic Congressional Committee, so this is a race that has gained national attention. Assemblyman Lawler graduated from Suffern High School and went on to earn his degree in business administration from Manhattan College, where he graduated as the valedictorian. Lawler and his wife, Doina, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, they live in Pearl River. And I also read that you have a new baby girl, so congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Assemblyman Lawler, if elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, what would you do as a congressman to improve the increasing crime problem in New York State?
Well, I think crime obviously is among the top concerns for voters, and New York's cashless bail law has been an unmitigated disaster. Sean Patrick Maloney called it his top priority when he ran for Attorney General just 4 years ago. Since cashless bail has been enacted, crime is up 36% in New York City, and over 40% of those who have been released on non-monetary bail have been rearrested while those charges are pending. So we have to get crime under control, and it starts by repealing cashless bail, which obviously can and should be done at the state level. It requires a change in raise the age. Right now, you have 16 and 17-year-olds that are using guns in the commission of crimes, and they're being treated in family court as opposed to criminal court. And so the gangs are using these 16 and 17-year-olds to do their bidding because they know they're going to get a slap on the wrist. You need to empower law enforcement. Part of the problem here is that you have politicians who have been out there calling for the police to be defunded. We need to ensure that the police have the resources needed to do their jobs. And you look at, for instance, in New York City, the anti-crime unit, whose primary responsibility was getting illegal guns off the streets. Bill de Blasio killed the anti-crime unit, and it has since been reinstated in some form under Adams, but not anywhere near what it needs to be doing, and that needs to be ramped back up. From a federal level, this is very simple. We as a government have a responsibility to ensure the safety and welfare of our residents, and New York State is failing to do that. And so the federal government has a responsibility. If New York State refuses to act and refuses to change its cashless bail laws, then the feds need to intervene. And there are multiple ways to do it. But Congresswoman Malliotakis has introduced a bill that would certainly allow victims of crime to sue New York State over its failure to protect them. But you also have the power of the purse. And it's funny how quickly governments and municipalities change their ways when the power of the purse comes into play. And from my vantage point, this is New York State cannot continue to operate in the way that it's operating with respect to public safety. And we as elected officials at every level have a responsibility to not only speak out about it, but do something about it. And if we can force change from a federal level and force New York State to act, so be it. If that's what it takes to change the law here, then I will use every tool at my disposal to do that.
And I guess on a somewhat related issue, we do have an open border. I know that's caused inflow of drugs like fentanyl coming into our country. What would you do as a congressperson to address that issue, that problem?
This is a major challenge. We have a porous southern border, and it's not just the massive inflow of tens of thousands of illegal immigrants every day, over 3 million since Joe Biden became president. It is human trafficking, women and children being raped and assaulted. And on top of that, obviously, the cartels pouring millions of pounds of drugs into our communities, killing 300 Americans every day. Over 100,000 Americans died last year. And Sean Maloney and Joe Biden are doing nothing about it. And it's totally unacceptable. We have a crisis at our border and in our communities as a direct result of the policies that have been enacted. Now, my wife is an immigrant. She's an immigrant from Eastern Europe. She came here over a decade ago. She earned her citizenship 2 years ago. So I respect immigration and we welcome immigrants. They enrich our communities, our culture, and our economy. So we want to ensure that we have a legal immigration system that is working, so that people who do want to come here can do so legally. But what we have right now is a broken system at every level, and one that is created a mess, not only at our southern border, but created a crisis in our communities. And the Biden administration is flying migrants up, weekly into the Hudson Valley, without communicating with local officials. And migrants are being dispersed into communities across the tri-state area. So this is a major crisis. We have to secure the border. We have to stop the inflow of illegal immigration. We have to take on the cartels and their drug trafficking. We also have to deal with the over 20 million people who are here illegally. You're not going to round up 20 million undocumented immigrants and kick them out. So we need to have a real plan to address those that are here in a undocumented fashion, and figure out what that path forward looks like. For some, it may mean citizenship. For others, it may not. And that's something that we have to work through. And then finally, we have to address the legal system, which is totally broken, and ensure that anybody who wants to come here legally has the ability to do so. But there needs to be a process. We need to understand who's coming and for what purpose, and make sure that people who are coming are contributing to our communities and our society, as most immigrants do.
Switching gears real quick, how do you plan to battle the inflation problem in America right now? That's impacting everybody, small business owners, and everyone who goes to the gas pump.
Look, inflation is obviously the biggest issue right now, and the cost of living. Hudson Valley families are struggling. My wife went to the grocery store just last week, and she paid $6 for a gallon of milk, $16 for a package of chicken cutlets, $4.50 for a carton of eggs, and $29 for a small box of diapers for our daughter. So this is a major crisis for families. And when they go to the grocery store and they get, leave with one or two bags and they're paying over $100 for groceries, that's a problem. When you're going to the gas station and gas prices are rising again because we've emptied out the strategic reserve, that's a problem. When home heating costs are skyrocketing because our energy production domestically is low and the Saudis are shrinking production over there, that's a problem. And so if we really want to tackle inflation, number one, we need to cut spending. The Biden administration has increased spending by over $4 trillion in just 21 months. And we need to make sure that we are increasing American domestic energy production. And those two things, coupled with obviously, lifting the cap on salt to help reduce the cost of living for Hudson Valley families, coupled together with addressing the very real challenges that businesses are facing with regulations, with taxes, the Inflation Expansion Act, which is what it really should have been called, raise taxes on middle-class families and businesses, and at a time of recession. And as Barack Obama once said, you don't raise taxes in the middle of a recession. And unfortunately, Sean Maloney and Joe Biden did just that. And so we need to reverse a lot of the policies that have been implemented over the last 21 months that have created this mess that we're dealing with.
It's interesting, the cap on salt. I know that was something I believe that the Trump administration implemented. So that's something where you would where you seem to agree with Democrats. I think Democrats are opposed to that cap.
Well, the problem here is, yes, it did come into effect under the Trump tax bill. Mm-hmm. But Democrats like Sean Maloney, who were in Washington at the time, rather than negotiate a tax bill, packed up their things and went home. And they allowed this to stay in the final version of the tax bill. And they said that they would repeal it, that if they got complete control of Washington, they would repeal it. Well, they've had complete control of Washington for 21 months, and they've not repealed it. In fact, they've doubled down on letting it stay in there. And Sean Maloney is in leadership. If he felt so strongly about repealing it, he should have demanded it be part of a bill. Or not vote 100% of the time with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi as he has. And so, to me, this is an issue of fairness. New Yorkers are being unfairly penalized by the cap on salt because of our high tax status. I think New York State needs to make significant changes to its budget and reduce spending and taxes to help alleviate cost. But at a federal level, we need to lift the cap on salt, and it needs to be multi-pronged.
What is your position on President Biden's $10,000 student loan forgiveness executive order?
I don't support it. First of all, I don't think it is constitutional. I think the president does not have the authority to just void a contract. And the reality is this: 62% of Americans have not had the opportunity to go to college and earn a college degree. So for the 38% who have been fortunate enough to go to college, myself included, it's not right for the president to shift the burden from those folks to others who did not have that opportunity, and make every American pay upwards of $2,000 to foot the bill here. And you're talking about $1 trillion bailout. What we need to do is focus on making college more affordable. We need to cap tuition costs, especially for those institutions that are using federal funds. Many of these very woke liberal institutions that teach socialism in their classrooms should be more than happy to have their tuitions capped, and they should be more than happy to have to spend out of their endowment. The idea that the federal government needs to be giving them support, and then they just continually raise tuition costs. And by the way, they're not spending much of that on student education. They're spending it on other things, is ridiculous. And Sean Maloney supports it. And he thinks it's okay for, a blue collar working class family who does not have a college degree to pay for somebody else's degree. And I just think that's fundamentally unfair.
All right, switching gears, since the Dobbs decision, the topic of abortion is definitely on the minds of many Americans in District 17. I will, excuse me, I will be speaking with Congressman Maloney later this week. And I do plan to ask him at what point in a pregnancy would he ban abortion, as he has been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. So I think it's an important question to ask people who argue the pro-choice position, that question. Within the Republican caucus, though, there seems to be a disagreement in the wake of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade. Many Republicans supported the Dobbs decision on constitutional grounds, arguing that decisions about abortion should be left up to each state. I know Senator Lindsey Graham has proposed federal legislation that would ban abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Do you agree with Senator Graham's efforts, or do you think abortion should be left up to Albany?
No, I do not support a national ban on abortion. I think this, based on the Dobbs decision, is best left up to the states. In the state of New York, abortion is obviously legal up to the moment of birth. I think that is a rather extreme law, certainly. But I do believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. But again, what I don't support is what Sean Maloney supports, which is abortion up to the moment of birth, non-doctors performing abortions, a ban on parental notification, and gender selection for abortions. Those are extreme positions. Over 80% of Americans are opposed to late-term abortion. So, I think the reality that we have here is that in the state of New York, abortion is not going anywhere. And reasonable people can have a reasonable difference of opinion on this. But what most Americans don't support is the bill that Sean Maloney voted for in Congress, which would expand abortion up to the moment of birth nationwide.
Do you think that Congress has any role, or is it?
No,
Or,
I think this, based on the Supreme Court ruling, I think
Mhm.
this is best left to the states.
On your assembly homepage, you've spoken about the need to battle anti-Semitism. How would you take that battle to the federal level, and how would you work to ensure the safety of our ally, Israel?
So, this is obviously an important issue. We have one of the largest Jewish communities in this congressional district. We have seen a rapid rise in anti-Semitism and frankly, a failure on the part of New York State to prosecute hate crimes pertaining to anti-Semitism. We've had violent attacks in Rockland County, including in just a few years ago during Hanukkah, a fatal stabbing. So, we all have a responsibility to denounce anti-Semitism. I think on a federal level, obviously, we need to ensure that we work closely with our strongest ally in the world, Israel, and help ensure their safety and security, as we have, for decades now. And we need to continue to ensure that, especially with Iran still posing a significant threat. The Iran nuclear deal, which Sean Maloney voted for, was a disastrous deal and did nothing but give billions of dollars to Iran to use it and help funnel money to terrorist organizations. And they will do it again. And so we have an obligation to remain vigilant. I am also vehemently opposed to the BDS movement. Sean Patrick Maloney is the DCCC chair. And as part of that, he is supporting radical extremists like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Jamal Bowman for reelection. They support the BDS movement. They believe the BDS movement is good policy. I am absolutely opposed to it. I've opposed it in Albany. I've spoken out against it in Albany. And will do so in Washington. So we all need to be vigilant. We need to speak out, and we need to make sure, from a policy standpoint, that we are not engaged in anti-Semitic policies that would negatively impact Israel.
We saw Twitter ban a New York Post article just weeks before the 2020 election that some people argue could have changed the outcome. Does Congress have a role in regulating big tech? And if so, what would you do to ensure Americans aren't censored or shadow banned for their beliefs?
Well, first and foremost, we have free speech in this country and freedom of the press. And I think certainly what is unfortunate, it seems at times, that big tech and specifically social media companies are picking and choosing who they censor, or what is deemed to be hate speech, or what is deemed to be inappropriate, content. And oftentimes it seems to fall on political lines, and it's wrong. And I think if big tech is going to do that, and in many ways interfere in the free exchange of ideas and political activity in doing so, then Congress does have a responsibility to act. Part of this really comes down to how they're treated, and how those platforms are treated in the law. And if they want the freedom to operate in the manner that they do, then they have to allow for free exchange of ideas. And so I think that's something where we really need to look at, how that operates within the law.
You're
How
referring to
best to
Section
regulate.
230?
I'm sorry.
Are you referring? I believe it's Section 230 of the
Yeah,
of that.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So would you want to overturn Section 230, or
I,
overturn how it applies to the tech companies?
Not necessarily. I think it is a much larger discussion that needs an in-depth analysis of what makes sense. But again, if these companies are going to operate in that manner, then Congress has a responsibility to weigh in.
What would be your top priorities if elected to Congress, and which committees would you seek to join?
Look, my top priority is obviously dealing with the issue of inflation, and crime and our porous southern border. I would certainly like to serve on financial services, transportation, as well as foreign affairs. I think obviously coming from New York, there's a lot of need, and certainly from a financial services standpoint, I want to make sure that the policies that are being enacted do not adversely impact New York.
Do you plan to elect Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any caucuses that you would be joining, or particular caucuses? I know there's like the Republican Study Committee, the Freedom Caucus. Is there anything?
I really haven't gotten there yet as to which
Mm.
caucuses I'm looking to join, but my focus will always be on representing my district, and the people that live in this district, first and foremost. So the caucuses I would likely join would be reflective of the district.
There's chatter about impeaching Attorney General Merrick Garland, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and even President Biden. I read a recent argument that President Biden's threat of retaliation against Saudi Arabia for not postponing the oil supply decrease until after the midterms amounts to the same thing that President Trump was impeached for when he tied aid to Ukraine to an investigation of then former Vice President Biden. Do you see an analogy there, and would you vote to impeach Garland, Mayorkas, and or President Biden?
I am not looking to impeach anyone at this time. I think, our politics, and you look at the Department of Justice, you look at attorney generals like Tish James, everything has become very political. And I think before we engage in discussions of impeachment, there needs to be very clear impeachable offenses that would be considered. I think what the Democrats did previously, does not necessarily mean that the Republicans should go down the same path. We need to kind of restore a balance and common sense in government, and I think we need to separate out the politics from governing. And sometimes I know it's easy to want to immediately jump, but I think you need to be very cautious in doing that.
Should Congress continue to fund the war in Ukraine? Should NATO get involved? And how? And I guess the most important question, I think, is how do we prevent Russia from exploding a nuclear weapon?
Well, look, Vladimir Putin is a vile, disgusting thug, and he cannot continue to act with impunity. And I think the way that this has unfolded, going back to Crimea and seizing land in Ukraine nearly a decade ago, to this most recent invasion, is a problem. And when Ukraine gave up its nuclear power, we entered into a treaty with them to protect them. And we have an obligation to fulfill that commitment. I believe our NATO allies do as well. And it would not be good for anyone in Europe for Ukraine to fall, because shortly thereafter, you would have other former Soviet satellite states under pressure as well. And that cannot stand. So we have an obligation. We need to continue to support the Ukrainian government and make sure that they have both the military and financial support that they need to beat back Putin. The world, including China, has a responsibility to ensure that Putin does not use nuclear weapons in any way to try and escalate or win this battle. So, this is a very serious situation, and it requires resolve, but it also requires cooperation. So, the Biden administration has a responsibility to continue ahead with what it is doing, but to make sure that our allies understand, the consequence of Ukraine falling.
Should Congress continue its January 6th committee?
Come January?
Yeah.
No. This has been political theater by the Democrats for no reason other than to try and make this an issue. Anyone who certainly engaged in storming the Capitol and breaking the law should be prosecuted. But the idea of this committee has been nothing but political.
You've made a particular issue of Congressman Maloney's whereabouts during this campaign. I guess why should District 17 voters be concerned about that? And what would you do differently if elected to Congress to ensure you remain in touch with your hometown roots?
Well, first of all, you're in Congress about half the year. You're down in Washington. So the other half of the year, you're supposed to be in your district. It's a full-time job. And Sean Maloney has taken it upon himself to serve as chair of the DCCC, which certainly has responsibilities. He's Nancy Pelosi's campaign manager and chief fundraiser. So he goes around the country raising money to try and keep Nancy Pelosi in power. The problem is he's been nowhere to be seen. And for someone who is in a swing district and who wants to represent a new area, 75% of this district is new. I find it jarring that he wouldn't be here campaigning. And when he is here, he basically goes to visit, like-minded people. He's not out talking to, voters. He's not out asking them for their support. And he's not talking about what he's going to do to improve their lives or make it more affordable to live here or safer. And the reality is he can't defend his record. And so all he can do is lie and attack through paid advertising. And that's pretty much the campaign he has run from the start. And, I think voters have a right to know that he's not interested in representing them. He's interested in keeping Nancy Pelosi in power, and that's it. And that's why we've pointed out his 10-day fundraising trip where he gallivanted around the globe to visit Paris and London and Geneva just 2 weeks ago, which seems illogical when you're trailing in the polls.
Assemblyman, thank you very much for your time. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, look, I think, in 3 weeks, voters are going to go to the polls and they're going to make a decision. But I feel very good about where we are in this race. And I think voters understand the challenges that we're facing are real. And we need someone who's going to go to Washington and fight for our community and make sure that our voices are heard. And unfortunately, Sean Maloney is not doing that. So, this election is a choice, a very stark choice. And I hope that voters recognize the need to restore balance and common sense at every level of government. This is the first time in our nation's history that Democrats control everything in Washington, everything in Albany, and everything in New York City all at once. And we've seen the results. A 41-year high on inflation, surging crime, skyrocketing gas and home heating costs, and a porous southern border that has made our communities less safe. So if people want change, then I hope that they will consider voting for me on November 8th.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.